Greetings viewers, I am Eric the Car Guy, but when I post videos to this channel, I call myself ETCG1 because it's the ETCG1 channel. Now in this channel we start things off, if it is your birthday, happy birthday. Have an electronic cake. All right, well, the purpose of this video is to clear up some confusion that I created in my last video about making mistakes. I was talking about in that video, which I will link in the description, how with this particular engine, this is Dad's truck, the completed engine. Yes, this is the future. On how when I first started it up and I took it out for its first test drive, it started making a noise and I found out that that was loose flex plate bolts. Once again, I'll link that down in the description for you. But another thing that I mentioned was the dipstick blowing out on this engine. And there were a lot of questions, a lot of comments to that. And I feel, well, I owe it to you to, let you know what was going on with that. Now, I don't know the exact cause, but I'm going to go over what I think it is in this video. And, well, I'm sure you're going to speculate and let me know down in the comments. But at the end of all this, well, this engine has got to come back out. I know this now. The question is, how can loose flex plate bolts cause the dipstick to blow out? Well, it can't. And you're absolutely correct for asking that question because it doesn't make any sense at all. Those are two unrelated issues. Now, initially, when I put this engine together, I used a different PCV valve and I used a different vent over on the side there. And since then, these are my attempts to try and correct a problem with too much crankcase pressure. Well, I've had this problem in the past. In fact, I had it last year on the power tour with the Ford. And it ended up being the burned up piston in cylinder number 8 on that engine. I think I'm looking at something similar on this truck, although not as severe. And given that this engine is multi-port fuel injection, if you're going to say that I ran it lean, well, no, it's fuel injected and it's multi-port fuel injected. So I'm not really sure what the cause is, and I'm honestly not sure what the problem exactly is, but the problem, I believe, is a loss of compression past the piston down into the crankcase, causing excessive crankcase pressure. So in other words, as the piston's coming up trying to compress the air-fuel mixture, instead of it all staying in that nice contained place to be squeezed and then ignited, some of it is leaking past that piston, getting down on the crankcase and over-pressurizing it. Over-pressurizing it to the point where I believe I have a small oil leak on the back of the engine that is now a big oil leak. In fact, that's kind of the reason why Dad, well, it's part of the reason Dad called it quits right around Indianapolis with the power tour, was because when I looked at the amount of oil that was coming out, it's all the way to the back on the spare tire. But we just kept putting oil in it and it ran fine. It had a very slight shiver miss, I'll call it that. But before I pulled the engine the first time to do the crank bolts or the flex plate bolts, before I did that, I did a compression test and I found that compression on cylinder number 7, which is the one back there, was lower than the rest. Most were 150, I think one was like 140, 145, but number 7 was 130, and I think that's where I'm going to find my problem. As far as doing a leak down test, I really don't think that's necessary because what I'm about to show you, to me, verifies that there is compression getting past the piston down into the crankcase, overpressurizing it, aggravating oil leaks and causing my engine not to run as good as it can. But this truck, Dad loved it. On the tour, he said it handled great. The brakes were way better than they were, and he was happy for it because there were a couple of times where we had to stop pretty quick, and he was headed right for my taillights and stopped with no issues at all. Air conditioning also worked in it, or works in it, I should say. The truck turned out great. I was very happy with the outcome in the end, and so was Dad. And honestly, my happiness was derived from the fact that he was so pleased with the work that was done to the truck, and he really enjoyed it. So let me show you my working theory as to why I believe that crankcase pressure is being caused by some compression leak, I believe, in cylinder number 7. Here are the actual numbers for that compression test. So these are all the cylinders, and number 7 actually just stayed around 130. This number 5 was 155, and 6 was down around 140, and so was 8. I'm not as worried about these as I am about this one that seemed to just hang out around 130. When I pull this engine again, I'm going to redo the compression test just to check it, but as stated, well, I'll show you here my test and why I believe that this is an issue with a compression loss into the engine. Yes, there is a small exhaust leak down here. I'm not going to be concerned with that at the moment. I'm going to try to address that after I get the engine out. But here is why I believe that there's compression leaking past down into the crankcase. Because when I lay this piece of paper up here, see how it's moving? Like, I can feel air puffing out of here, but you can see it when I put this piece of paper here. Also, you can see the engine visibly shakes a little bit. A brand new engine like this, I don't want to see that. I want to see it like rock solid, just idling, just clean, happy. But it's got a just ever so slight miss that you can see, and I believe that's a result of that compression loss. Now, when this happened on the Ford, you could clearly see that there was blow-by happening because on the breathers, you could just see the smoke puffing out of there. So it was pretty plain to see. In fact, I could see it coming out from underneath the hood. But we're going to do the same thing on the Ford here. So on the Ford, you can lay the piece of paper on here and nothing moves. So there's no blow-by or anything happening with this one. Well, I'm hoping that clears up the confusion of why loose flex plate bolts can cause overpressurization of the crankcase and to make my dipstick tube blow out. So in other words, the two had nothing to do with one another. I believe the actual issue is I have a combustion leak or blow-by significant enough to cause pressure inside the crankcase, causing an oil leak and causing this dipstick tube to blow out initially. Now, another note on that dipstick tube is when I first got it, the O-ring that was on it, it was super loose. In fact, you could just breathe on it and it would pop out. So the dipstick was loose, and that was the first thing to come out and relieve that excess pressure inside the crankcase. I believe this problem has been there since day one, and I took it out for the first time, and once again, I'm not really sure what it is because the engine went together well. I hope it doesn't come down to me having to measure things, but that's my intention. My intention is to pull the engine and just measure those cylinders and find out, well, first inspect the piston on number 7, see if I've got broken rings or something of that nature, and then I need to find the real root of the problem. And I think once I do, this will be a very smooth, nice running engine. This truck is awesome. It's truly awesome. In fact, temperature-wise, as far as how hot this thing gets, we were climbing up the mountains in Virginia, and I asked Dad, because I knew the temperature on my Ford got pretty hot. I got up to like 230 or something like that. So long pulls up hills. So I was really working the engine, and I knew Dad was too. And I asked him, I was like, so what was your temperature? He's like, oh, it got all the way up to 190. So if working this engine at 190 is the temperature that I get, it's going to be, I don't want to say indestructible because obviously I have an issue now, but when I get this thing together, it'll be exactly what I want. So I'm very happy with the fact that I stayed with this 350 and did not go with an LS. It was perfect for this truck and this application, and it's a tribute to the truck and my dad. I will put links in the description to additional videos and information. Feel free to comment below on what your theories are as far as what's going on. But I hope that the information I've given you gives you something to deal with. But I will get to a point where I will get this engine out. We will get to the bottom of this mystery. If you want to know sooner rather than later, follow me on social media. That's where I post most of the things that I find in the moment. If you have automotive questions, I ask that you head to ericthecarguy.com. That will be linked in the description as well, along with, as I said, other information. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and do all those things that help make a living. I super appreciate that. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty, and I will see you next time. Hopefully with more answers instead of questions.